Good morning, Blues, for Monday, the 13th of January 2025. It is the start of a new week. Chelsea are back in Premier League action on Tuesday night against Bournemouth. A huge game. Going to be talking about that in my team selector, which I will upload later today on YouTube and also my podcast feed. Thank you for the support on Morning Blues last week. So we're already into week 2 of Morning Blues. Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays mornings here to talk about Chelsea. And today's show, I think the big story that has broken over the last 24 hours is Renato Veiga and the potential of him leaving, not just on a loan, but permanently. What does that mean for Chelsea's left-back situation? What does that mean for Chelsea's overall transfer strategy that a couple of players this month could leave after only signing last summer? Because it is quite staggering. And there's a lot to get into here because there are rumours about the player's own motive within this, and then that leads back to what did the club promise Veiga back in the summer. We're going to jump into all of it. I think the first place to start, and I just have to talk about it, was of course looking at the FA Cup over the weekend. Chelsea beating Morecambe, no surprise. But then of course on Sunday, Man United beating Arsenal on penalties, and of all people, Kai Havertz missing the key penalty in that shootout after what was a truly horrendous game for him and a horrendous week for him in front of goal. I just want to briefly talk about Kai Havertz because I had no issue with him leaving in the summer of 23. I was quite staggered that Chelsea even got up to 65 million because he was nowhere near Chelsea's, he wasn't even close to being Chelsea's best player in what was admittedly a terrible season. But I think there was a lot of narrative and perception outside of Chelsea that Kai Havertz had just been really badly mistreated and been played wrong and was in a terrible environment. And very quickly at Arsenal, there was a narrative, especially when they were doing a little bit better last season, that he transformed as a footballer. Suddenly, this was a goal scorer. This was one of the best attackers in the Premier League. And Chelsea was stupid, not only for letting him go, but 60 million for Arsenal was a bit of a bargain. We're sat here now in January of 2025. Easy to forget, it's a new year. And I think Arsenal are having a lot of buyer's remorse. I think some people quickly cottoned on to the problem of signing Kai Havertz and the problem of his ilk of player, that rehab projects rarely work. And I think if you buy a player that is effectively a question mark and you have to solve, it's a bit like my issue with us signing Joao Felix and players of that nature who you spend a lot of time wondering what's their best position, what do you have to do to get the best out of them, when Chelsea, for 20 million less than they sold Kai Havertz for and quite a lot less than they bought him for in 2020, bought Cole Palmer, who doesn't need any long pieces and theory chats about what he is as a footballer. He just is a brilliant footballer. And Arsenal fans, I think, don't want to comprehend the Palmer and Havertz chat, because that really is a no-go, because it's quite clear that Chelsea hugely upgraded, and I'd argue, even for its critics, Chelsea upgraded with Nicholas Jackson. I think Jackson is a far better centre-forward than Kai Havertz ever was in terms of his all-round game, his goal scoring. I just think he's a superior footballer. So I couldn't help but chuckle. That chuckling didn't last that long, because then we saw the FA Cup draw and Chelsea were drawn away to Brighton in the FA Cup. Not the easiest draw. However, we've got very lucky in a lot of cup draws, particularly the FA Cup. It feels like a lot of the time we get home draws, and most notably against Championship or League One, League Two opposition. And Brighton play a style of football that I actually think is pretty helpful for Chelsea compared to recent weeks. So it's a tough game. I'm just more intrigued to see what Chelsea team will be sent out to the Amex, because I don't think Maresca will have as much leeway to rotate. I think people will want to see a competitive side in that game and for Chelsea to progress in the FA Cup. So let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Let's get, though, to Renato Veiga. So this broke last week in some ways, or it started to escalate last week before the Morecambe game, that Wolves had some interest in Renato Veiga, but that was quickly shot down. Then Renato Veiga played a ton of minutes against Morecambe, started the game, played a big role in that game. So then we move on to Sunday, where it suddenly breaks on Sunday afternoon UK time that Borussia Dortmund have an interest in Veiga. Veiga is very interested in making that move, and had already agreed to that move. And then it quickly spiraled where the likes of Ben Jacobs, Nazar Kinsella and Matt Law all backed up the report. So it is a genuine report. And Veiga, apparently, this is from Matt Law's piece in the Telegraph, Chelsea value him at over 20 million and are adamant he will leave the club only on a permanent transfer this month. Veiga is said to have agreed to join Dortmund during the current transfer window, with the German club now hoping to negotiate a loan move for the player. But sources insist that Veiga will not be loaned out and that Chelsea will only consider selling him this month if their valuation is met. Now, although we signed him for 12 million, Chelsea are looking for over 20 million. And Nazar Kinsella has already reported that actually the valuation between Chelsea and Dortmund is not that different. Whether that means it's going to go up to 20 million, we will wait to see. Let's start with Veiga. I'm not as negative on Renato Veiga as a footballer as I've seen people be over the past few weeks. I found it quite bizarre how it has flipped dramatically that Veiga is a rubbish footballer, was always a rubbish footballer, and despite actually not playing that many serious minutes for Chelsea, people have concluded that he's a useless footballer. I don't get how people make that conclusion. The way I see it, he has been used as a rotational figure. He's had some good moments, he's had some shaky moments, but I don't think it's fair to make a definitive conclusion on his level at Chelsea. I would be surprised if Veiga turned into a world-class player for Chelsea. However, I could see a scenario where he turns into a pretty valuable squad player who could also play centre-back, which is part of the discussion here, that he, on his own, he believes he should be playing more football and actually would like to play as a centre-back. I actually could see with his profile him becoming a decent centre-back. But I think most of us, when we signed him, you can check my show when we signed him in the summer, we knew he was going to be used as a rotational left back, competing with, at the time, I think I may have said Ben Chilwell, but even back then it may have been clear that Chilwell wasn't going to get that many minutes, but clearly Cucurella, and also could play in central midfield, kind of this Swiss Army knife player that was being talked up as a big part of Maresca's transfer business or business that Chelsea were going to do in service of Enzo Maresca. And that's what Veiga has been used as, but apparently the player doesn't feel that's best for him. Now, I was on a Twitter Spaces, X Spaces last night with Cy Phillips on the Chelsea Echo with The Score and Louis Beneventi. And I think, Cy Phillips did bring up the point that if Veiga has just out of nowhere demanded more football, there is a realistic thing for us all when Chelsea turn around and go, well, you're not really there yet. Like, you're not getting in front of Marc Cucurella. You're also not getting in front of Levi Colwill. If we recall someone in central defence, Trevoh Chalobah, which I will get to actually, that's another thing I want to speak about today, you're not getting in front of him either on your best day, on their best day. It's just not happening. However, there is also a point that Cy Phillips made that I agree with. What was he promised? What are these players promised when they signed for Chelsea? Was he sold that actually he was going to be a lot more than just a B or C team player? He was actually going to be used very quickly in the first team because he's now getting international minutes for his nation, Portugal. So there's a lot of that. I will go back to a general point here that I don't think it's a great look for Chelsea that Veiga, Dewsbury Hall, you can't for Axel Disasi because he wasn't signed last summer, but Axel Disasi could also be leaving this month. But just generally, a lot of the business that was done in the summer is now coming home to roost and is being analysed seriously as not that great. And it doesn't entirely surprise me because I was saying it for a lot of the summer that Chelsea's business was not amazing. Veiga was one of those rare moves where because the price was so low and we needed cover of some kind at left back if you're not going to play Ben Chilwell, I thought maybe it could turn out to be a low risk, high value signing. But when you lose that player, it's obviously going to mean that Chelsea are likely now going to have to go out in the market and spend more seriously at left back if Veiga does leave this month, because there's no plans for Ben Chilwell to become a squad player again for Enzo Maresca. Which then, if Veiga leaves this month, no matter what profit they make on him, it kind of completely eliminates the point of signing him in the first place. Because if the justification for signing him was he's going to be a future player, and then he leaves within 6 months, and then you actually have to go and buy the ready-made footballer, you just kind of ponder, you go back and go, well, why couldn't we just spend the money on the ready-made player or the player that you actually wanted in the summer? Kirkes from Bournemouth is kind of the big one. Patrick Dorgu was a name I spoke about actually last January. If you remember last January when Chilwell was injured and Colwell was having to play at left back, Cucurella also was injured for a period of time. We were speaking about left back as a priority back then, 12 months ago. So the idea of this situation is still a problem for Chelsea. Again, I don't think it's unreasonable for me or anyone to sit here and go, what is the point of our business if it's not to actually make a better football team? And in certain positions, there are still major holes. So that is why Chelsea's squad building is massively undermined by their business. And I think in terms of, what it actually entails and why certain areas seem so bizarre and badly managed. Because it's not just this area. It's the centre-back, the whole Trevoh Chalobah mess, the central midfield, the Dewsbury Hall mess, the shunning of Carney Chukwuemeka, things we spoke about last week, and of course in attack, the lack of serious competition as centre forward for Nicholas Jackson. All of these things, when you add up and you add the goalkeeper onto that as well, makes you think that our summer business was not that great. And I said it at the time, our summer business was not that great. And unfortunately, despite a good run of form, I think it's being exposed a lot more now. Veiga leaving, if it means Chelsea sign a superior left back, then happy days. Because I want level raisers in this squad. And if Veiga has kind of turned around out of nowhere unexpectedly and started demanding minutes when the club really never said you're going to get those minutes, mate, and he's turned around and go, no, actually I want to play first team football, and Chelsea can't offer that to him, which they really can't because Cucurella has been outstanding so far this year, then if you can get a little bit of a profit on him, is at the end of the world. But I can hold, space for that view that it's not going to be the end of the world. But then also I think you also have to comprehend and value the point that Veiga as a squad player could very quickly become surplus to requirements, and what was the point of signing him in the first place? And just generally the mood around Chelsea's transfer business and the assessment and clinical look that's being had at the moment, that a lot of it just isn't actually improving the squad. And are you wasting time with a lot of these players? So I think that's something you guys will let me know in the comments below. The other thing to speak about today is Trevoh Chalobah. Oliver Glasner did not feature Chalobah at all in his FA Cup squad yesterday. And post-game, he was asked about it, and he basically said that for contractual reasons, I did not include Trevoh Chalobah. I think this is a sure sign for me that Trevoh Chalobah is being recalled by Chelsea. I think Chelsea have probably decided to themselves, I mean, we're still on the 13th January. I don't know why January feels so long. It's a terrible month. But we've still got a bit to go in this January transfer window. I ponder whether Chelsea are using Chalobah as an insurance policy. Cy Phillips last night said very concretely that Chalobah is very open to returning to Chelsea. Despite the way he's been treated, this is a guy who loves Chelsea and wants to perform at Chelsea and continues to believe in himself and back himself to prove people wrong, which I just think speaks volumes about the character and resilience of Trevoh Chalobah as an individual, which kind of makes me think you want a player like that in your football squad because they are, willing to play in several positions. That's the great thing about Trev as well. He can play as a right back, he can play as a centre back, he can play as a defensive midfielder if you want. I think he could even do a job at left back. I think he is a bit of a Dave in that sense. I think he could and has always been willing to do his best wherever he's asked to play for Chelsea. So I think he'd be a valuable player to bring back at this time of the season. And I think very quickly, because of the Fofana situation, I actually think he could become a first teamer once again. I could also see a scenario based on the injuries to Reece James, the form of Malo Gusto, that Josh Achimpong also becomes a regular first teamer for Chelsea. So I'm happy that Chalobah could be returning. I'm not happy that he returned, kind of bails out the sporting directors, and then he's treated the same way in the summer. Because I could see a scenario where Chalobah once again ends the season as one of Chelsea's best centre-backs. And again, we're in a situation where we're wanting to discard with him, which I wouldn't be happy about. But that's been the way he has been framed at Chelsea, even before this ownership arrived. So it is what it is. I want to hear your thoughts, Veiga. I don't think many people will be sad to lose him. It's just a really messy situation. And can actually Chelsea go out there and spend seriously in this window for a player and a position that I don't think they would have prepared to seriously invest in? Ben Chilwell, it kind of eliminates the point of freezing out Ben Chilwell if you lose Veiga. People are very naturally going to turn around and go, what was the point in not even using Chilwell against Morecambe if this player now has been even linked away last week and now could be on the verge of joining Dortmund, who are a Champions League club. They're playing Champions League football. I think Dortmund are a decent level club. It's why I said last week that Connie Chukwuemeka moving there is a good move for his career. So those are my thoughts. I think it is incredible that Veiga, only 6 months later, could be leaving permanently. I don't think, whatever way you slice and dice it, is a great look on Chelsea's transfer business. I just don't. And people may call me unfair and overly harsh and blaming the club, but I think, these sporting directors asked for us to assess them seriously after 4 windows. Last summer was the 4th window. This is the 5th window, and this window so far has not looked great on them either. So we wait to see what happens between now and the end. Does this lead to us actually getting a better left back? I hope that's the way it ends up, but it's hard to look at this situation as anything other than messy, whatever way you look at it currently. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Follow across the socials at SonOfChelsea. Please rate and review the podcast. Be back for Morning Blues on Wednesday, but more concretely and more quickly, I'll be back for my team selector later today ahead of that Bournemouth game on Tuesday night at Stamford Bridge in the Premier League. So thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.